My name is Mark Harris. I identify, let's see, my pronouns are he, his, he and his. The ones I ever use. I identify as a Maroon, which is an indigenous word which means an African Native American hybrid, cultural hybrid. English is my cradle language, but I also speak Cholo Spanish, school book French, and a smattering of other languages. Let's see, I'm an American, and let's see, middle class medical person. Who's next?
Do I need to stand in the middle? Hello, everybody. I'm Indira Bakshi, and I'm a white American. Ethnically, however, my father's from India, and I grew up in an English-speaking household, even though my father spoke Hindi, Punjabi, and Urdu, in addition to English, French, and German. But he didn't speak any of those languages to us. The nationality, I'd already covered that. I identify as an American. My preferred gender pronouns are she, she, her, hers, herself. Anything that are, those are good. Culturally, I'm kind of a suburban child. I grew up in the suburbs of the United States, lots of small suburban areas outside of big cities. My mother grew up in the Midwest, and we moved there when I was young, and so I have a kind of a Midwestern cultural background as well. Languages, my native language is English, but I also speak German and Spanish, and have spent some time living in Mexico and have worked with the Latino community for a long time in Lane County. And at times, not today, I feel very Mexican. At other times, I don't. It just kind of depends where my brain is. And who's next?
Hello, everyone. My name is Myra. I identify as my race to be indigenous, also a little Anglo, Spanish, whatever. My ethnicity is, wait, is that the same thing? Oh. It's kind of a mixture, I guess, and of a lot of different components. My nationality is Mexican American because I stay connected and proud of my Mexican family and roots, yet I'm American nationality-wise. And my preferred gender pronouns are she, hers, herself, sometimes his. My culture is a mixture of Latino, indigenous spiritualism, Islamic, and also kind of New Age. And then my language, I speak, my first language is English and Spanish, and then I also speak French and some Arabic and some Portuguese. So, yes, thank you.
I don't like standing in front of people. So my name is Barbara Dumbleton, and I work over in the science department for a long time. And my race, I guess, is Caucasian. My ancestry is from England and Scotland mostly. And I grew up in small town USA in Connecticut, in a very small town, kind of a Protestant town where we lived for 17 years, but we're still outsiders because everybody had lived there for generations. So My pronouns would be her and she. My culture is, I like what you said about kind of New Age, but I grew up in as an Episcopalian and then moved on to kind of more of a spiritual nature. Let's see, languages, my first language is English, and I also speak enough Spanish to be able to be understood. So.
Hi everyone, my name is Tia Marie Gomez-Seller. I work in the international program as an academic advisor. My gender pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I was born in Spokane, Washington, but I grew up in south of Spain. My mom was an international student in Spain, and she got pregnant, so she was sent back, being a minor. So I got to be born here. I have 2 different passports, curious enough, with 2 different names, because Tia wasn't accepted as a name in Spain, so I can be a secret spy if I want to take my career that path. Probably not anymore, since I say in public in front of a camera, never mind. There's my spy career. My first language is Spanish. I learned English 7 years ago when I came to the United States, because I figured it was time to know my other side of my culture, my other language, and get to know my family too. So here I am.
Whoever will step up. I'm Ruth Wren, and on my father's side, my grandparents immigrated from Germany, and on my mother's side, they immigrated from Holland. So I'm really just second generation American, although I've never been questioned about that. And that is significant all the time, I notice. Having had lots of friends whose families have been here for many generations, who are always asked, where are you from? Where are you from really? And nobody ever asks me if I'm really from Holland or something. So I identify as a female and use the standard pronouns, although even that is fluid. At my age, I don't have a speck of estrogen left in me. Things change. So, just as race is socially constructed, I have come to learn that gender is very fluid also, and there's a lot of factors there. First language is English. My son married a woman from Paris, and so my grandkids speak French and English, and I'm learning French so I can speak with them. And my 6-year-old is going to the Japanese immersion school, my granddaughter, and so she speaks Japanese as well. And that's another thing kind of culturally, as in our family conversations, even the little kids will try to search for the word in English, and then they'll switch to another language because we don't have it, And that also helps me understand the fluidity of that kind of identity. Was it culture? Well, we've tried to define white culture, and I can't. So that about sums me up. Anybody else?
Hi everyone, my name is Darren Fort. I work in High School Connections, and I am white, and my ethnicity is a mix of English, Scottish, Irish, German, French, and Native American, Shawnee, Iroquois Nation. Consider myself an American. My preferred gender pronouns are he, him, his. I also struggle with describing culture. I grew up suburban with a parent from the Northeast and a parent from the Southeast, and that was an interesting mix, and deep Southeast, and now I live in the Northwest, so it's been an interesting journey for me. My first language is English. I took Spanish from 8th grade through 12th grade, but that was many, many years ago. I consider myself barely functional in Spanish, but I aspire to be much better.
So, hello, my name is Claudia or Claudia. Today, it can fluidity. It'll go with Claudia or Claudia. For my race, I define as Latina. And ethnicity, my ethnicity, I have a heritage of Catalanes. So that's my father's side, and my mother's side is Spanish. I am Chilena. I am married to Mapuche Huilliche, and during the time we lived in the Mapuche community, I was accepted as a Mapuche woman. So within that culture, I am seen as Mapuche because I'm married to somebody of the community. And I carry that with pride. Nationality, I said, Chilena. Preferred genders, she, her, hers. And there's been a lot of fluidity at times. And culture, I define as bilingual, bicultural. I have values from pre-neoliberal Chilean side. I was raised here in the United States. When I was 5, I came here. Lived on a campus as a kid on a campus at MIT where I didn't understand that everybody spoke different languages. And honestly, all the kids I played with played in German and French and Swahili, that we all played together. So language was something also fluid in that time. I realized that I had a North American culture when I got back to Chile and started having cultural shocks and started distinguishing between the two. So I have 2 cultures, that's why I'm bilingual, bicultural. And what else am I missing? Yeah, it changes. So today, this is me. And tomorrow, I incline. Sometimes I'm more Catalana, and sometimes I'm more Huilliche Mapuche. Sometimes I'm just plain old Claudia, with the whole darn mix of it all. And I like that fluidity of it. Language, English and Spanish. And that English and Spanish has produced a form of dichotomy. I realize I don't have all my language, so I struggle when it comes to academics. My language is separated by area of preference. There's things I love speaking in Spanish, things I love speaking in English. And I notice that my brain will shift depending on the level of safety I am feeling. So when I'm not feeling safe, it'll actually go to English, which I identify with my more male part. Rationale, quick numbers, prefer numbers all the way in English. I have a hard time and struggle in Spanish to do math. But when it comes to philosophy, literature, going into deep conversations, I love Spanish. And I also enjoy Spanglish when I want to mess around. This has also developed a keen sense of understanding, and it's an invisible language is what I call, because I can sense. One example, I always remember when I was a kid and I didn't speak English. It was maybe first grade, and I was the only child there of color or spoke another language, and another little girl comes. She spoke another language, and she was Asian, so we didn't speak the same languages. But I remember sitting at that desk and watching her, and she needed to go to the bathroom, and she couldn't say it in English, so she ends up peeing in the classroom and crying desperately. So I peed. to be solidarity with her, because she couldn't speak it, I couldn't speak it, and I wanted to tell her that despite that we don't speak same languages, I speak your language. So it's developed this dichotomy has developed a sense of empathetic and what is known as emotional intelligence. So that's who I am today.
My name is Kelly Ochoko. I am Asian. My background or my ethnicity would be I'm 3/4 Filipino and 1/4 Japanese. But how I was raised in my family and who kind of took charge of that, I identified more with the Japanese part. And over the past year, have been looking at my Filipino side kind of for the first time and getting interested in the language. I am American. I prefer the pronouns she and her. Culture, I'm from Hawaii, and so the culture of Hawaii is a mishmash of a lot of Asian cultures. You got lots of Portuguese in there, and I love it. I love that I can't pinpoint that there's one culture that I go by at home, and Hawaii is still home to me, even though I've been here 21 years. Language, my first language is English. I can speak a little bit of Spanish and a little bit of Japanese. Lived in Mexico and in Japan for short periods of time, but the language that I'm most comfortable in is Pidgin English, and that's when I speak it, I feel the most at home and the most comfortable with myself. Next.
Okay, my name is Judy Gates, and I'm a Homo sapiens sapiens. Ethnicity, so let's see, I have to think about this. So ethnically, I guess I can consider myself, I come from indigenous, Portuguese, and what people call Mexican here, but that's my nationality. So Portuguese and probably an indigenous. Mexican national, U.S. national. I have 2 nationalities. Preferred gender pronouns, she, her, hers, and they. I'm very comfortable if they say they when they talk about me. Culture, very American now, but Northern Mexican, indigenous, and there's a lot of Portuguese in my culture that I acknowledge. Languages, Spanish, then English, and a lot of Spanglish. Oh, and my culture is also Tex-Mex, because I function with the Texan Mexican people. And Spanglish is probably my most comfortable language. Next.
So I am Jessica Alvarado, and I've been sitting here going race, ethnicity, nationality, and trying to remember which one each means. So I may not do it in the order that is intended. So I follow Kelly's suit. I'm Asian. Ethnicity, it kind of implies to me you know where your parents came from. So since I'm adopted, I don't know my real ethnicity, but I'm assuming it's Korean because I came from an orphanage in Korea. So South Korea. So nationality, I would say, is American. Preferred gender, I was thinking maybe it should be me, myself, and I, but it could be, I suppose, she. And culture, I have a lot of cultures I have an affiliation for, and I love to participate in those kinds of activities. So I would say I have friends and family from Mexico, and then I love Korean food. And language, my first language, I don't know if I ever spoke it. Could have been Korean, but I'm not sure. And so the only language that I think I know, is English. So, I've tried really, really hard to learn Spanish. I made it through Spanish 201. I think I got a B, but I'm not very good at it in terms of reproducing it. I have a grandchild that's going to be bilingual in Spanish, though, so at least I think I'll be able to probably keep up with him until he's about 5 or 6. So I'm hoping to bring my Spanish back up so that I can communicate with him in Spanish as well.
So I'm Sibel Higgins, and I'm an ESL instructor here at Lane. And I'm one of the facilitators, observer person, and I just made your evaluation form. Race, I'm white. My background is great-grandma immigrated through Ellis Island as an indentured servant from Ireland, and in like the teens of the last century. Great was grandfather was a colonizer of Ireland, and then colonizer of the U.S., English colonizer, and was a very bad guy. He was one of the reasons why we have freedom of the press as a foundation, because people were against him and writing against him, and there was a lawsuit against him, and he lost. That was one of the foundations of freedom of the press. He killed a lot of people, especially Native Americans in the area where he was governor of New York. Ethnicity. I grew up in mainstream kind of college white culture in Eugene. My dad was a physics professor here, and I've been deeply involved since pretty much 16 years old in learning more about other cultures besides my own, and lived in China for 3 years and didn't want to speak English, didn't really speak much English the whole time, so got very deeply infused with Chinese culture, and then other international students, mostly Central Africans, French-speaking Central Africans, and some Spanish-speaking Central Africans. Those are my two big communities in China. And since then I came back to the U.S., and then I was here, and then I got really involved with the Latino community from about 1990 till today. Preferred gender pronouns, she, her, hers. And culture, I'm mainstream white American culture, but most of my world has been international, and I feel like I've protected myself from things I don't like about mainstream American culture, kind of biases and things. I have my own inside, but I've kind of lived in this international world here in Eugene pretty much all my adult life, everywhere. So culture is kind of a mix, let's just say. Language, I speak English and Chinese and Spanish. I speak French and German. So, who's next?
I'm Carolyn Liddy, and I'm the counselor for advanced technology, so I work closely with Claudia. In fact, I don't mean to sound boastful, but over there they call us the dream team. So, yeah. Race, my mother was Native, my dad was German. As far as nationality, I'm American, of course. She, her. As far as culture, my value system is pretty thorough, blue collar. I notice a lot of times I have problems with middle class values and middle class kinds of ways of thinking and moving. So I try to stay aware of that. And language is English.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lori. I'm kind of a boring white girl. My family is basically from Sweden on my father's side and came over here somewhat recently. My mother's side, a bit of Chippewa, French-Canadian trapper, and a lot of Scottish folks. So anyway, I am an American, and pronouns, you can call me anything. I guess I prefer she and things like that, but I'm hoping that in some days soon we'll come up with something else for all of us to be inclusive. My culture is kind of interesting. On my father's side were a lot of college professors, and on my mother's side were a lot of trailer parks. And I got tossed in between the two cultures a lot, so I had to be kind of a chameleon growing up and learn to not be too snobby on one end and not be too kind of lowbrow on the other end. So it was kind of hard sometimes. I speak English, but I've studied Spanish and French. Haven't had a chance to speak them a lot lately. So, but I love language and I love learning about other people. So, thanks. Who needs this microphone then? Anyone? Mark.
Thanks.
Okay, a lot of you speak Spanish, so I'd like you to close your eyes during the video. Please. I know which ones of you who said you speak Spanish. Close your eyes.
We all.
If you understand enough Spanish at a beginning to intermediate level, good. Are they closed? Yeah. Claudia.
I like closing my eyes.
Please try to remain with your eyes closed during the video unless you are a non-Spanish speaker. Okay?
Kema poliwi se tlahtolkamanali, nochi tlamanti tlen yehyektitzi, keja sitlalime tona tehuametztli, tlen tichiua timasewalmeh, keja kema titekiuia totlalnamikilis, o tlen timachiliah pan totlakayo o ipan toyolo, ayueli tikita. Kema se tlahtolkamanali poliwi, nochi tlen onka ipan itlaltepaktli, keja nopa ueyi atl uan nopa atentini, nochi tlamantli tekuanimeh, uan nochi tlamantli xiuitini. Nion axtimoilhuis, nion axueli tikihtos, nion axueli titlachilis o tikakis, pampa politok nopa tlahtoli. Huajka motzakua ipan kampa ueli chinankotini, ipan kampa ueli tlaltepaktli keja kema motzakua se puerta o se ventana, kema onka sekinah tlahtolkamanali, mitztlachialtis, pampa timachilis tlamantli tlen santoteco ueli kichiua, uan tlen kichiua masewaltlakameh. Yani katlen kipia yolistli ipan itlaltepaktli. Kema poliwi se tlahtolkamanali, nochi poliwi, hasta nopa kamanali tlen titekiuia para titeilhuise titeiknelia. O kema titepouiliah para tlachke techkokoa o techkuesoa. Poliwi nopa antiuatl huika tlen huikayaya touehkapan tataua. Nochi tlamantli tlen kipouayaya, kejatza momahtoya, kema motiochiuayaya. Keja moskaltihkeh, ayokaka hueli sampa kipouas. Kema poliwi se tlahtolkamanali, eli keja miki. Uan miak mikehya, uan miak mikise, eli keja kema tlapani se teskatl, inintos, eli keja akawilotl, tlen sampa notehki, pampa ayokaka molinia. Uan kema panoyani, mas sewalmeh mokaua, mas teikneltihkeh.
It was good with the eyes closed. It's so different from when you're watching.
That was a coyote, because that didn't sound like Spanish.
There were some subtitles. I didn't want you to
I didn't understand much.
It's not audible. Yeah. But I mean, it sounds a lot like Spanish. But I guess.
There's some Spanish words.
Oh, okay.
There's some difference. Any other comments?
Well, I don't speak no Spanish, so I didn't have any idea what they were saying, but the visual symbols seemed universal. A lot of the symbols seemed universal. And I was very curious about what they were trying to express, because I'm not really sure in the whole thesis or whatever it was.
The only Spanish word I could catch in there, because my level was kind of beginner, but it was mas. The rest of it, I couldn't pick up very well. It didn't sound like what I'm used to. It was
That's exactly how I felt.
It was Nahuatl. It was Nahuatl. It's an indigenous language from Mexico, spoken in Central Valleys, northern Mexico.
They teach Nahuatl at UCLA.
They do?
They do. In case anyone's curious.
Are we going to do ecotonics?
Were you going to pass out the English translation?
I hadn't really planned it, to be honest.
Can
I just wanted to get your reaction.
Could I ask something? Because, I mean, what elicits for me, being an immigrant, and I don't like microphones, but I just want to ask the group, because what it elicited as I closed my eyes, I've seen this video and I know what it is about, but I actually was listening and I didn't understand. And it took me back to when I first moved to the States. And exactly I didn't feel the fear. I knew that I was in a safe place and I felt good, and it sounds beautiful, that word, all the words sounded very like a song. But I'm wondering if anybody had any feelings or was aware of how you experience not understanding at all what was being said.
And it's, every day I'm with international students who are speaking their languages and I don't understand what they're saying, but I'm in a position of power as a teacher. So being here and I'm just listening to that, and it also took me back to being where I did not understand any of the language that was going on. And here it's kind of safe, so I could just relax and listen, and it felt like waves or water or music. But then I thought there were other times where I did not understand anything that was going on, and there was a much more risky situation, and then it becomes like a danger thing, because you don't know, or it can be you, or your awareness is super heightened because there's some things you've got to watch out for or take care of or get somewhere, and but it kind of brought me back into that. But because we're in this relaxed situation, I could just like relax and feel the waves of the language going over.
I'll just say I also felt safe, but at the same time, I had an expectation that I was going to understand more, that this was going to be in Spanish that I would understand, maybe third, of it. And so as I was listening, I was just thinking almost negative thoughts about myself. Boy, I really don't know any Spanish at all. I'm awful at Spanish.
But it was in Spanish.
I opened my eyes because I realized I didn't understand anything. And then I started realizing, like, this doesn't sound like the Spanish that I know. So I wasn't sure whether it was Spanish or not, because it has different sounds in it. But I was trying to read what it was saying on there, because I was interested in, I was looking at the images. And I started closing my eyes, and then I realized, like, oh, I thought you had said if you understand Spanish, keep your eyes closed. And if you didn't, you can open them. So I opened my eyes, and the language is beautiful. So I was really interested in hearing the sounds that I weren't used to in Spanish. So it's a beautiful language.
I did feel, I liked, the images were so beautiful and so archetypical almost, and I had that sort of feeling like I want to know what they're trying to tell me, Although it was a lot different than when you're in a country where you don't speak the language and you are not going to find a place to sleep or eat unless you've worked this out. So it's didn't have the fear, it just had a kind of a yearning. Like, what are they saying that they know that, I could know too if I understood?
I don't speak Spanish, so I focused on the images. And the thing that really got me were the colors. I mean, the colors were just incredibly captivating, I thought.
I listened to the intonations, to the dance, the rhythms of the language, and it's just fun to listen to the dance of it. And then I wondered how would this, I always wonder when I hear languages. So I've been in cultures where people that speak different languages, it's fine, and I've been in cultures where if a person is speaking a different language, it makes people uncomfortable. And as I listened to the rhythms and everything, which was so beautiful, I wondered if this would be a language that made people comfortable or uncomfortable.
I think the whole time I was listening, I just was wishing I could understand, and again, feeling that kind of helplessness when you can't recognize anything you're hearing. It just always makes me want to learn more languages.
When I was watching that, I actually thought, and I was trying to listen really hard because I thought maybe I'll pick up on something. And then I thought maybe it should be closed caption because then maybe I could pick up some syllables or something. But it's kind of funny to me that I was actually thinking about when I went to Mexico, but I was there with family and friends. And so there were people that we didn't share the same language, but we found ways to connect, like playing cards because we all knew what numbers were, and different things like that, and finding ways to just emotionally connect. And so that's kind of what was happening for me with that, was I was trying to capture the emotions that it was conveying and trying to kind of guess what the message was, other than the caption at the bottom when a tongue dies. I figured it was part of that, but I don't know.
I think that being in a safe environment, like you said, really plays a big role in that. Even when you announce that something will be in a different language, I know in my head, well, everybody shares a common language here of English, so it can't be that bad if I don't understand, because we can share in this common language. However, I've been in situations, and it really reminded me, When I moved to Mexico in my early 20s, it was to pursue a teaching certificate, but I knew gracias and I knew sí. I didn't even know no was no. And I remember being on the airplane, landing in Guadalajara, and the announcement came on without any English before or after it. It was just in Spanish. And I remember my brain just finally realized, oh, many expletives. I remember that feeling of not feeling like I was in that comfortable environment where I could turn to someone and say, what did they say? What was that?
So for me, I saw the video and I know the translation. I hope we can share because I really like the meaning. But what you all have been saying, I don't want to make any assumption, but when she said, if you speak Spanish, please close your eye, it sounded to me like many people assume that they were speaking in Spanish. Am I wrong? It was someone who thought that the video was in Spanish? Because that's just all the assumptions that we normally make, right? Like with me, it's just very interesting how many assumptions people make because I look white, but then I speak and they're like, what are you? Or if someone is speaking in Spanish, it's like, well, your Spanish is so good, where did you learn it? So it's like all those assumptions that we tend to make daily with like people that we interact, with the student who sit in our office or even in the bus or when we're walking, that's how humans have evolved, where we're just making assumptions and putting people into boxes. So the entire exercise has been very interesting.
The first time I saw the video, I kind of recognized, even though there were Spanish subtitles, that it wasn't Spanish. And it's kind of appropriate that, we're doing this in a longhouse, which is actually designed from an indigenous point of view to teach indigenous languages from an indigenous point of view and kind of reify them. Because it's not surprising to me that Nahuatl is taught at UCLA, because UCLA, the city of Los Angeles, is only 12 years younger than this country, and there were pyramids there. And Nahuatl is the language of the pyramid builders. So the fact that we don't know that, and we have a bunch of loan words in Spanish and English from Nahuatl, is a powerful driving that lesson home about race, ethnicity, culture, and language, and what happens when a language dies, which was the theme of the video. Yeah.
Anybody feel anything when they heard this? Was there any emotions that you could detect? You could?
I can't necessarily explain why, but there were several moments that just felt sad to me. Yeah.
So I just felt a lot of curiosity, but when I'm reading it, when I'm tongue-tied, so is this a language that is no longer being used, or are there still indigenous cultures?
Not what's widely spoken.
That's
there
right.
are many languages that have been lost.
Especially, I think.
And this is a poem written in Mala, from Malasteca, Hidalgo state, the Hidalgo area. Actually, I don't really know much about it. If you want, would you like to read it in English? It'll make you cry. You want to see it now? Yeah. Well, the question is are we really not going to do ecotones because we don't have time?
We don't have time.
So we'll have to have an alternative plan. That's why I let it kind of go. This was supposed to be short, but it kind of went long. So you can listen now and read in English. People listening in.
Kema poliwi se tlahtolkamanali, nochi tlamanti tlen yehyektitzi, keja sitlalime tona tehuametzli, tlen tichiua timasewalmeh, keja kema titekiuia totlalnamikilis, o tlen timachiliah pan totlakayo o ipan toyolo, ayueli tikita. Kema se tlahtolkamanali poliwi, nochi tlen onka ipan itlaltepaktli, keja nopa ueyi atl uan nopa atentini, nochi tlamantli tekuanimeh, puan nochi tlamantli xiuitini. Nion axtimoilhuis, nion axueli tikihtos, nion axueli titlachilis o tikakis, pampa politok nopa tlahtoli. Huajka motzakua ipan kampa ueli chinankotini, ipan kampa ueli tlaltepaktli keja kema motzakua se puerta o se ventana, kema onka sekinok tlahtolkamanali, mislachialtis, pampa timachilis tlamantli tlen santoteco ueli kichiua, uan tlen kichiua masewaltlakameh. Yani katlen kipia yolistli ipan itlaltepaktli. Kema poliwi se tlahtolkamanali, nochi poliwi, hasta nopa kamanali tlen titekiuia para titeilhuise titeiknelia. O kema titepouiliah para tlachke techkokoa o techkuesoa. Poliwi nopa antiuatl tlen uikayaya touehkapan tatawa, nochi tlamanti tlen kipouayaya, kejatza momahtoya, kema motiochiuayaya. Keja moskaltihkeh, ayokaka ueli sampa kipouas. Kema poliwi se tlahtolkamanali, eli keja miki. Uan miak mikehya, uan miak mikise, eli keja kema tlapani se teskatl, inintos, eli keja akawilotl, tlen sampa notehki, pampa ayokaka molinia. Uan kema pano yani, mas sewalmeh mokawa, mas teikneltihkeh.
So I just want to let you all know, because I think this is important. We had prepared a simulation, a multicultural problem-solving simulation, but we couldn't make it work it out with the time, but due to that we don't have enough people, we're not able to do it. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because it's just funny that I know you all, and I don't know many people in the LCC, but I know you all. So I don't see really new faces. Actually, yes, I see a new face. That's a new face, but I actually knew about her, so I don't count that as a new person. I always see you in the past, so I guess that doesn't count. I guess you're a new person too. But my point is that how many people are we in the room?
12, 13.
No more. I mean, we need 12 people, and there's I need to facilitate. There is other people to facilitate. So it's just, I think it's very important. I mean, I'm going to have a conversation with my office because I feel like they kind of let me down. But this is a very important topic, and this is cultural competency. This is actually affecting our students. And I know because I was actually a student who have to go through that, and that's what I'm so passionate, and that's what I'm going to keep trying to do this exercise until they kick me out of LCC. I hear that's not possible, but I don't think nothing's impossible. So hopefully I can get people in the room before I get kicked out of LCC. That's going to be my goal. But I will also encourage you all to, if nothing else, try to have the conversation. Next time that you come to a cultural competency workshop, trying to bring 2 more people. If we can bring 2 more people and 2 more people and 2 more people, one day maybe we can have their room full, and one day we can serve a student like they deserve to be served. And also our peers, I'm new, I only have been here for 7, 8 months. I'm out of my probation, so I can say this. But it's
not only our students who are suffering for the lack of cultural competency at LCC, but I see it all the time among us. You know, we hurt each other all the time, and we're not even aware of it. So it is very important that people, everyone, good employees, happy employees who are being every day going like, I want to go to work, I want to help our students, I want to do my job even better. You know, we need to keep them happy. And when they feel like, oh, I'm going to go work and I'm going to be oppressed, I'm going to be allowed to say a word wrong because English is my second language, or I'm going to be allowed to say something because I come from this culture, or someone's going to be able to appropriate my culture, or your culture, or someone else's culture. It's just, I'm not going to feel like I want to come to work. Like as students, I'm not feeling like coming to class. The student go to my office and I tell them, well, you're Saudi, you don't really care, it's okay, it's fine, just do whatever you want. See you later. Assuming that he's a student here just having fun, instead of like he's a really hard worker who want to get good grades and make their family very proud, because if they don't finish their studies, that's their family tradition and their family putting it down and move to another city. It's just, we're going to lose our students, you know, and best case scenario, they move to another school. Worst case scenario, they actually kill themselves, and that's had happened before. So I just wanted to encourage you all, talk with your peers, make sure that they come to these kind of events, make sure they do more workshop, and it is tough, but sadly we're the ones who have to educate our peers. And it's tough sometimes, but it's very necessary because at least for me, my students go first. So I just want to share that. And too glad that we cannot do the exercise because it's very fun.
I wanted to, thinking about why I decided to be part of the panel, not only because I speak 2 languages, but all of us here speak English, but we don't all speak the same language. And, part of what brought me to be participant in this is hoping that somehow we all walk away realizing we don't speak the same language. Our cultural background, our growing up, tinctures the way we speak. We use the same codes to understand that we don't speak the same language. I've had the experience of associating with indigenous communities in South America. And it reminded me, this story. When I graduated my dance career in Chile, I was one of the few female choreographers. I was hotshot, underground choreographer. And I traveled to Peru, and I had a presentation in Machu Picchu in Peru. And I was feeling all cool because, great dance, and I'm like, cool. Graduated and everything. And I sit down after I finished my dance, and there's an indigenous man that sits next to me and starts talking. And he was speaking Spanish. He was Quechua. And I started hearing like the Nahuatl. I was like, this is poetry. It's beautiful. What is this guy doing? Honestly, I thought he was reciting a poem. And when he finishes his story in his poem, he says, pues, mamacita, ese es el espíritu de mi música. ¿Cuál es el espíritu de tu danza? So, mamacita is the term used, mamacita papacito, for Pachamama, the Mother Earth. So he had finished giving a description of the essence of the music he played as an indigenous. So this is a culture that have music from the moment they're born, okay? And he says, well, this is the spirit and the essence of my music. What is the spirit and the essence of your dance? I had just graduated. And I said, you just annihilated 4 years of dance. You destroyed me. you know, I can tell you about Russian ballet, I can tell you about Martha Graham, I can tell you about why ballet wants to reach the sky, all the history of dance. But you destroyed me. And I thought it was a beautiful graduation present. And so in that, living 6 months with a Mapuche community, I also started realizing that they spoke Spanish, especially when I was around, they spoke Spanish, and I started realizing that it wasn't the Spanish I knew. Your students speak English, it might not be the English you know. And I started realizing the differences, you know, I used to teach English and Spanish for the University of Chile. And part of my assignment was to teach cultural aspects behind the language. And so, grammatically in Spanish, you mention the subject just a couple of times. And for me, as a dancer, the way I could describe Spanish is like Rococo. So it brings the subject, it brings the person I'm speaking to, it needs to bring it into the conversation. So I start with one pronoun. And I take kind of for granted when I speak to in Spanish that you're following who we're talking about, because the subject is not showing up as much as English. So English will always have the subject in the language. And so if you cut a dialogue of a person speaking Spanish in half, then you want to go back and you're in the meeting, you need to go back a bit to catch up and then go back up, okay? In English, because you have the subject, you can be interrupted, and then you can continue. It's a bit more is what I would describe. So in Spanish was Rococo. English for me, I described it, was linear. And it also, in English, you have more adjectives. And part of that adjective is to create a distance. So my way of respecting and courtesy in English is I don't bring you to proximity. I keep your space and respect your space. And so I started observing courtesy things. And one of my cultural shocks was when I got to Chile, I would say thank you to everything. And people were getting annoyed at me because they would say, you are part of us.
Well, you know, and that's interesting because the American culture is independence and individuality, as opposed to other cultures that, you know, are more. I mean, we do have our we have family and respect family, but it's that, you know, spirit of individuality going off on your own.
And it's reflected within the language.
Right.
So, this time around, my degree is some other stories that go, so I'm finishing now a degree in anthropology, and I had a real great class on linguistics and how every single language on earth can detail aspects that one language can't describe. You know, and there's some dying languages in northern Russia that they can put one word is a full sentence. You know, and what they are describing in that full sentence, that full idea is amazing. We all speak English in this room, but none of us speak the exact same language. None of us. And you told me a lovely story once about the nurse and how you became a nurse. None of us speak the exact same language. And you know, that's really important. I work with different demographics. I've worked at the UO with students from the UO, and I worked here with mainly advanced technology. Language is so different for all these students. And so, how are we conveying messages is really important. We really can't take for granted what our students are understanding. And we need to always consider the language. And when we look at our web pages and when we look at the information that comes from such a middle class academic language, and we want our children, gosh, today I've been calling them all children, sorry. That's not okay. It's today I'm a mother, okay? But we want people to experiment with different languages, but we can only allow people to experiment with different languages when they can embrace their own language. And how do you embrace your own language identity? Is by feeling safe and included. Because if you're not feeling safe and included, you're going to struggle to fit in. And one of the researches I want to do someday is the syndrome of assimilation. How you need to let go a part of you to fit in, because I want to be accepted by these people. You know, I feel the responsibility as a person of a higher education institution that feeds our community with citizens, the responsibility to make sure that there's a core identity so that they can learn. And maybe they learn my language. That's why I wanted to be in this work.
There is often pressure in environment outside of the longhouse, because the longhouse isn't designed to assimilate. It's basically to utilize all different languages and be intentionally multilingual, because you can't say everything even in the same kind of, your point is well taken about we don't speak the same kind of English. I know when I'm giving a lecture on neurochemistry and people say, speak English. I'm speaking medical-ease English. So you can't say it any shorter than the word that it is. But that doesn't cover everything. There is no English word for confianza or conscientiousism, which in their respective languages to basically talk about deeper concepts than are in the English language. So, in my field, assimilation is negatively correlated with addiction. The more assimilation, the more addiction. So we definitely we want to encourage people to expand their language capability as a protective factor. And that goes along with the whole cultural competency thing. Expand. Why would you want to be less intelligent? If you speak more languages and more types of languages, you're more intelligent, and that's the goal of education, is to increase your intelligence, not decrease it.
There's an experiment if you Google solidarity, and you look at images, and you look at it in different languages, the images that you'll get for the word solidarity, so different in Spanish from English. It's just so different images. Solidarity in English, you'll see images connected more to communism. Solidarity in Spanish, you'll see more community. And it's a word that you can move around, because if I say solidarity in Spanish, solidaridad, and so you could understand it. Yeah. So language is beyond just the sound, right? It's extended. So I work with students that are not exposed all the time to a lot of language, but all speak English, and they're coming maybe from poverty or generational, hard working, so language is there, and so how to expose them to open up. But I can't expose anybody to anything if I don't first accept where the language they're speaking. My daughter struggled a lot when we immigrated with English and Spanish. She came when she was maybe about 10 and a half, 11. And dyslexia added to it. And she made it. She first had to accept the dyslexia. So she sees language totally different to start with. But she is doing a minor in Spanish, and my husband and I are just impressed on how her English is improving. Doing a minor in Spanish. And so, as a person with my sensibility, I say, the point is, you finally feel accepted for who you are within yourself. Because she's finding that identity within the language that comes. It's about finding identity and helping them find identity. That's when a person is ready to learn.
So I was thinking as you're talking, I know we brought this up in the conversation in doing this, the series of workshops, but many times we don't realize that language is actually could be used as a mechanism of oppression, and it has for ages, for the history of humankind. And we do know, we can trace back in the United States that the techniques to subdue other communities was to take away their language. That's another one, and it's proven. There's enough document to the point of 1848, whenever, I think that's when Mexico becomes the U.S. And even at that, it's not that long ago, but they converted everything to English, even though the Constitution in that area was in Spanish, even after, for a long time, in the California area. So we have actually enough documentation or research, which, for me, I struggle with research. My dad is a researcher, but science itself is a whole culture, and it has a language. And that language typically is very exclusive. And so going back to our students, and I like what you said, Claudia, we have to, I thought of Paulo Freire. He's one of my favorite of all times. Not just his name, but the fact that he spoke about language. And that's the whole research. If we want to, I feel like I can talk about his philosophy, but what he was saying, being him light-skinned, resilient, and where the black people are totally, they're at disadvantage to the white people. He says that the way we educate or we give information is in a way where people can understand. We use their culture, we use their language. And I think that's to take, whenever I had a conversation not long ago where I said, language can be oppressive. And the person, and it was here at Lane, and it was like, how so? And I had to stop and think, how can I explain? I don't think I ever had to explain from the get-go. But we are in academia. As I was looking at where I come from, middle-class academia. All my life, I was an academia kid. I know a lot of words in Spanish. So when I moved to the States, my level of language was really high, and I could acquire a lot of language in English comfortably. And I recognize that when our students are marginalized, they lack language, because that's the mechanism that our governments and many other governments outside of here in the whole world keep people from wanting to more information. So if we acknowledge that, and we can be aware that instead of correcting someone, maybe I want to understand why they speak the way they speak and be comfortable. And that's why when I say I love Spanglish, it took me so long to get over that English and Spanish can be a merge and just mix and just, there's no rules to Spanish. If you can be fluent in both languages, your brain just goes back and you just throw, and the other person is catching everything. And so I recognize that even though a lot of purist people that say English only, Spanish only, or proper, we are then becoming that part of oppression instead of opening up. Yes, we want people to have more knowledge, but if we don't welcome them at where they are, at their point, I don't think we're going to be opening their mind to what we want to share. And likewise, we're probably going to learn a lot from people that have a different language and a different culture and different values, and they are all conveyed in the same words that we use in a different way. So I just thought that's exactly what it is language can be used to educate, and not to educate in a condescending way, but to convey knowledge that we have and share it and expect some back, or it can be used from a dominant point of view and close the door and kind of in a preaching kind of one way.
So Claude Steele, social psychologist, has a book called Whistling Vivaldi, and he refers to research done on how you pose things to different groups. So to women, in STEM, if you say certain trigger words, they will actually do worse in their test. If you use other words, it's all tested. Black male, Caucasian males, they test all the groups, and depending on the way instructions are posed, they will excel or fail, which is really, really interesting. And they do this with most of his research is with freshmen and students in university. It's a great book, and I recommend it because it makes you question how we pose our instructions online, how we give handouts, and where are we taking the language and where are we starting with the language.
What's the name of that book?
Whistling Vivaldi. Claude Steele.
My grandson and daughter-in-law are living with me, and they're from Ukraine. And one of the things I've become so aware of is how language forms thinking by being around them. Because sometimes I'm just amazed with the situation where we're thinking about it so differently that you wouldn't even think it was the same situation. And my grandson, of course, is learning English, learning to read English and everything. And he will sometimes point out to me something, and he'll say, it doesn't make any sense. And it's amazing to me what doesn't make sense, as far as the things that I take for granted, that of course it makes sense. I never had this level of intimacy with someone else that didn't speak English as I have with him. And it's really, really important. Really important.
You just make me think about when I first came here, I bargained with my grandma about I have hungry, and my grandma would say, no, you're hungry. I'm like, no, I have hungry. If you feed me, I won't have it anymore. Right. She won't. I'm hungry.
Yeah, that's funny because there's especially in Chile during that transition, because I literally had to kind of learn Spanish again. I had very domestic, like puerta, silla, to a one level of Spanish, okay? And when I get there, it's like, what are these people saying? I just, and I had a cultural shock, so I didn't want to speak the language. And it made it really hard for me to learn it until I had to give in. And I remember my mother also, she wanted to keep the language for us, so she decided not to take in English. And I see how the cultural shocks can affect the way you acquire the language. When I came, so there's times that I've been able to I honestly have, so I say, my gender identification is she and her and hers, but I honestly can say that my masculine energy is absolutely English. My feminine energy is absolutely Spanish. And I can distinguish that. And so there's times that I play with it and I speak English in Spanish. The order of the words, kind of a Yoda thing. But I can play with it. And then when I returned to the United States, this time around, I just had been, I've been teaching English and Spanish, right? And I get my first job as a receptionist at Oregon Social Learning Center. And they didn't want to give me computers because they were all afraid that I might not know how to use a computer. And when they started hearing me speak English, I'm like, oh my gosh, they asked me, how long have you been here? A week. Oh gosh, you're so intelligent. They related my capacity of language to intelligence. And we do the same within our own cultures, because academia is kind of like that. We are branding language in our students. And we want them to expand, of course. Right? But we presume how intelligent a student can be based on the language they speak. Whether it's English, Spanish, or whatever.
Yeah. Can I say something? So, from what I'm understanding, there's multiple subjects or multiple points being made. But I think one of the reoccurring things that everybody going all around the room has said was basically the differentiation, the difference of people's perception of English. Although we all speak English, you can say something that you think is so endearing to someone, and for you it's you're saying it in a nice way and everything, but then they might just take it wrong, totally understand it in a different way, but they understood those English words, but they perceive them as something totally different from what you perceive. So yeah, it's difficult even in English, and if you use a lot of academic words, because I always grew up around colleges and my parents going to college and stuff, and working in colleges, so I know a lot of academic words and I don't use them because my friends don't understand me. And part of learning Spanish was I understood it my whole life because I lived in El Paso, Texas, border town, but it was difficult for me because when I came here and I realized I don't know any Spanish, I just I kind of shied away from it for a long time and just didn't want to learn it. And then when I got to about 18 years old, I think, is when I wanted to actually learn Spanish, when I started really learning it. And I'm still learning, and I still don't speak very well. And what pushed me was seeing my family in Mexico and realizing I really don't know much about them. I'm always far away from them. I want to be able to chat with them online or whatever. And I just realized the only thing holding me to them, connecting me to them, was my mom. And that, someday I'm gonna have to take on my ties to my family, and if I really want to keep that and not lose it, I've got to learn the language. So I started speaking Spanish to my cousins and uncles, and
you know, I thought I was so good, like speaking and everything, and they were like understanding me. And then when I get back home, I'm like, Mom, I improved so much. And she's like, but you don't speak that well, just so you know. I'm like, really? She's like, yeah, you know, your cousins love you. They want to make you feel comfortable, and they want to, because they would just like decipher what I was saying, and they would just be like, oh, okay, like they would decode it, and they would like try to get it through my hand movements or what I was saying. So it's just interesting because like I can understand anything, but when it comes to speaking, because I don't practice it very much, like I freeze up, or I'm like, oh, I don't know really like what to say, but I want to say something. So I would just say whatever, like however I thought it was. And I definitely speak very bad Spanish, but I still speak Spanish. So it's kind of a hard journey. Like I actually speak better French than Spanish, which is sad because I took lessons in French. So it's just, and I think French also helped me to actually learn Spanish because it's so much alike in structure, and like it made me realize like a lot of stuff about Spanish I didn't realize before. So it made it easier, but yeah, it's just interesting how like people like that are really accepting, like you can feel comfortable and you can excel and you can just be like saying everything the wrong way. And I kind of wish they would have like corrected me, but they didn't, because they just wanted me to feel like safe and just keep talking to them. And I think I really appreciate their efforts for sure. They really tried to just let me like express myself and share stuff with them. But if they didn't understand, they would of course ask me like, what are you trying to say? So that's always important too, is to like ask people, what are you trying to say? Because some of my friends talk in poetry kind of, or metaphors when we're speaking to each other in English. And I find it frustrating because I will take it and assume like they're saying this, and they're like, oh my gosh, no, I'm not saying that at all. And I'm like, well, tell me it real. Like, I always was spoken to by my mother, and like logical, straightforward, this is exactly the point I'm making. No like little white lies or no, like everything was so direct. So when people talk to me in like a poetic, like fun way, and they think it's really fun, they're like, don't you think it's fun? And I'm like, no, it's not, because I have to try to figure out what you're saying, and sometimes I make assumptions, and then like I'll react to it in the wrong way back to you, and then you'll be like, whoa. And it's interesting because I wish I could be more poetic and more creative like that, but I'm very logical. Like I just want to know exactly what they're saying and why, where it's really coming from. So yeah, it's interesting.
There's a word, and because a lot of our references are in English, and I don't know necessarily the equivalents in other languages, but when somebody says something in a certain way, like people make appointments with me over the phone. And, you know, it's a professional environment. So they come in my office and they look, I'm looking for Mark Harris. That's me. I'm Mark. You don't look the way you sound over the phone. Like, what did you mean? I don't have to ask. What did you mean by that? So I kind of play around. So the black psychological term for that is microaggression. You know, under Darrell, you know, they actually have, you know, a species of microaggression. So okay, what did I look like when you heard my voice over the phone? Well, blonde hair, blue eye. Well, I'm paid to sound white, but my voice is black at the roots. And then she blushes, and I say, you must be from Oregon. And she goes, well, yeah, I am. How did you know? I'm from Los Angeles,
And this is the way black professional people sound in Los Angeles, right? Technical English. And, okay, let's work through that. So you had different expectations of who I was, and you expected me to speak ebonically, which I would only do that if you understood like the poetics of ebonics, because ebonics is not bad English, it's English with an African influence. So we be doing it means we have done it, we are doing it, we will do it, we will always do it in one word. So it's not bad English, it's English with an African time sense. Linguistically, that's how we accept. There's papers on that. So there are other languages that share that capacity, but we have to make allowances for each other's relative knowledge or couples.
Mark, I'd just like to say that I think it's really great and really cool how you approach that situation with the student that comes in and is looking for somebody else. Because there are many different ways you could approach that situation, positively, negatively, and all the way in between. But you take an approach that is at the same time educational, but also friendly, positive, not condescending. And so from what I can tell, then I think you probably that has a generally positive effect on that person, changes the way they think, and you guys get to know each other a little, where you did before. And wow, if we could all approach all of those opportunities like that, it's not easy. I want to share, I have a different situation which is not, well, I guess it is sort of language related, but it has to do with the spelling of my name. Because my name is D-E-R-O-N, and pronounced Darren from birth, although I became Deron in middle school age, and both of my parents from middle school on changed over and started calling me D-Ron as well, just because they liked the sound, it was endearing. Anyone who called me D-Ron was always somebody who, in a sense, loved me, friend, whatever. It was that's the way it was. And to this day, Oregon is actually the first place where it hasn't happened that as people that I know reasonably well, but haven't paid attention to the spelling of my name, start to call me D-Ron in sort of a fun, seemingly fun way. Everywhere else I've lived, it happened very quickly, and it hasn't happened here, and I've always been curious about that. But people who haven't seen me, there have been multiple situations where they assume I'm African American, either D-Ron or Duran, including my freshman roommate in college. He just, D-Ron from Philadelphia. I mean, he couldn't believe that this white guy, little blonde white guy showing up. We were sure, that I was going to be an African American. So it's interesting.
I have similar experiences being European.
Sure.
My husband saw my name on a list before he met me, and he thought I was going to be my aunt. Now she's 88, but then she was about 45, middle-aged Indian woman in a sari with a bindi, matching bindi and lipstick color. I'm shocked.
very interesting.
I have to say, I appreciate how you planned this with the introductions at the beginning, and Marco, you started out saying, wow, there are a lot of ways to introduce ourselves and to take a turn. That was a great exercise for me, and I struggle with this still. I said Hawaii is my home, but Oregon's very much my second home. I love Oregon. And I struggle with, I don't know how to put it, and I sometimes I get angry that I'm worried how to put things. I love it when people ask where I'm from. I don't mind when people ask, where's your family from? What are you? I said all of those questions to me are like, yeah, I'd rather you ask me than you wonder or don't ask. But I know that there are people who are something concrete. So I express that to my husband, who is Caucasian and grew up as an Army kid all over the States, basically, Air Force kid. And he said that, well, when he was growing up, he was taught that it was kind of rude to ask those things. And I'm like, why would it be rude if you want to know more about someone? And, just like I met Jessica last week, and today, I wanted to know, like, so where are you from, and how did you end up coming to Eugene? And for me, these questions are just simple questions, like really wanting to get to know who a person is. But I worry, like, does that offend some people? How I might ask and be direct in that sense, does it offend people? And more beyond that, why? So I can learn how to communicate better and be more respectful, because I need to be respectful. But I am realizing that some people are taken aback by the question, where are you from? Who are you? I don't ask who are you, but what are you?
I learned from my multicultural, my mixed race students that one day they can, so I had a student that taught me so much. She was Black Japanese. And one day she would come into my office and say, I'm Black. The next day, I'm Japanese. And she showed, she that fluidity, and I was like, that is so cool. That you really don't need to identify in a box other than you. So sometimes when I have students come in, I'm really curious. I ask them, how do you identify ethnically? How do you identify ethnically? And it's kind of fun because it's allowing them to be. And I always put it before. Do you mind if I ask? I'm curious to know how you identify ethnically. You don't need to answer. You give that opportunity. But when you give that sense of identity and allow for a person to express their identity, it's been well welcomed. People feel, oh, you're going to listen to who I am.
My daughter-in-law really wants you to understand she is not Russian. That she's very proud of being Ukrainian. So she appreciates it when people ask questions.
And it's interesting. So I've been here almost 20 years in Oregon, but I was in a border town forever after Mexico, actually longer in Texas than Mexico. Nobody ever asked me where I was from. It was nice. I go to LA, nobody asked me where I'm from. And it's interesting, culturally wise.
But this is, for me, it's nice to hear you and I check in with you because there was a situation where I was like, Kelly, how do you feel about that? Because I also don't want to think that you're going to react like I react. But my question is open to everyone in the group. When we hear an accent, we always get the where you're from. It's a given. I can put money, I can put $1 in a jar in my office and I'll have hundreds by now of every time somebody makes a reference to I'm not American. In many ways. The latest one was, what's your real name? And I thought, whoa, I never heard that one. And again, they are microaggressions and we have to be very careful when there's students doing it. And when they're peers as well, there's a difference of power balance. But what's interesting is, if it was inquiring, why don't white people get it as well? Because I sure feel that when I see somebody white skin, English, I may ask, I may be curious, but what is the dynamic in this setting that gives only, first of all, the entitlement to ask when the person has either skin or accent different than white.
Or a different name.
Or a name. And so I don't know that, I'm not trying to, kind of balance, I'm just saying that for me, my question is, why is it just to me? Because I've had a lot of white friends that they never get asked, and they're actually from Germany, but they were second generation, but nobody ever thought of it. And I don't know, so I think that's what for me triggers a little bit more of discomfort than the curiosity.
For me is, I try to be like best intention, right? But when someone asks me where you're from, I know they're asking where your accent is from. They're not asking me because normally when I say, well, I was born there, I just say, they actually tell me in my face, no, you're not. But literally, I have people like, no, people in Spokane, Washington don't speak like you, things like that. Like, show me your ID, prove it to me. And that's my point, right? I can literally don't leave my house without being interrogated and without being questioned whether I belong here or not. And growing up in another country is like, and I have both nationality, I have both passport, but I never was sent back to my country until I came back to my country. I never was, like asking me where you're from until I came to actually my country. So it's kind of like, I feel like I thought that this was also my country, but every time that I go out, someone is kind of telling me, no, this is not your country. And I have people literally telling me, go back to your country. And I'm like, professor telling me, go back to your country. So it's just, I like when people ask me, oh, where your accent is from, I actually tell them, oh, thank you for asking it that way. Because I know what the intentions are, and it's not like they're questioning where I'm from here or not, they're just curious, have a pretty accent, fine, you want to know where the accent is from, that's fine. But it's how we word things play a big role, and it's how we were talking, right? Like, we all speak different English, even though we all speak English, we speak different English, we all make assumptions, we all might take things different, so it is complicated, and it's through conversation and respectful and respecting this intention. I normally just play with people and say, guess. Actually, Ukrainian is number 1, Russian is number 2, German is number 3.
So 2 hands, I just want to point that out.
Go ahead.
I think about that question fairly often, including for my children too, because they're girls now, but multiracial. And they get a lot, not like where are you from, but more like what are you? Kind of a question. And then for me, where are you from really kind of depends on the context of the opportunity. If it's from a place of wanting to know my story or wanting to know more about me, I'm fine with that. But if there's the implicit message, why do you belong here? why do you have a right to be here? Or are you smart enough to be responsible for what you're doing? Or there's a question of my ability or my level of privilege that I should or shouldn't have. That's kind of bothers me. So, it's not always in the words, it's in the body language, it's in the approach, it's in the context. So I guess there's times I interpret it as an aggression, and there's other times I'm like, oh, yeah, maybe you know. So it really kind of depends on context for me. Because I think I have an accent. So it's not usually that for that reason. But for it could be, I guess, more my appearance, why my face doesn't match my name, and those kinds of things.
You said basically what I was going to say. I mean, I encounter every day somebody asking me, are you Persian? Are you Eastern Indian? Are you this? Are you that? Are you, like, they'll guess, like many do. I could be anything if I wanted to. But it's just difficult, like, when people stop me when I'm waiting tables at work, and they're like, oh my God, are you this or that? And to me that implies like there is a fantasy in their head about who or where I'm from, and like that begins, like that stems from like the sexualization of like indigenous or like colored people, like in the colonial times, like ethnocentrism, like it's basically racism, like it's like they're so obsessed with where you're from, what is in your blood, like what's your genetics. Like, it's this obsession, and I think that's where that stems from. Like, people really being fascinated by, like, what my genetic makeup is, and I don't even know what it is, so it's like, I'm sorry, I wish I could help you with your fantasy, but I can't. And I, like, you know, sometimes I fantasize too, but I don't know, it's just difficult. Like, I mean, like, being bombarded with it all the time, how I look so like eccentric and ethnic, and I look so exotic. Yeah, and to me, I'm like, I'm a Texan girl, like Chicana, like, I don't know, I just, like, I don't know, it's just difficult, like, it's just, yeah, it depends on the context. Like, if someone wants to, like, get to know me and they're, like, inviting me to talk to them, I'm totally cool with that, but when they're, like, they kind of come with these assumptions, or they're not making me into this novelty or like something interesting, that's when it bothers me, because it's like, it's just setting me apart from themselves rather than like including me with them and being like, oh, like I want to know about you and tell you about me. Like, I like that. But yeah, it depends on the context for sure, and the body language. And sometimes people don't know how to say stuff, so sometimes you gotta ask them an investigative question. Like, yeah, like, who's asking? I don't know. Mind. Okay, you're still doing something. When I was your age, I experienced a lot of it. And this whole thing brought up, I didn't even know what was happening until I started thinking. When I grew up from age, I guess I was 6 or 7, we moved from Washington, D.C. area, from a pretty, I mean, I was 11, I can't remember anything. But anyways, I was 11 and we moved to Indiana. And my father died, so I didn't have an Indian father in the household to show that there was somebody that brought me into this world, and it was just stuck in a small town in Indiana. And from that time on, all the way through college, I experienced a lot of things like, where are you from, what's your name, what's that, and I feel like I always was interested in my background, my ethnic background as well. So I'm German and French and Irish and Catholic, and I just found out there's some English in there, and that was a surprise. And I was really proud of that, but I never really quite understood when being asked those kinds of questions that I really think what was happening is people were putting me aside. I wasn't part of Indiana. I wasn't a Hoosier. I wasn't
part of that, whatever that was that they were. So it was kind of like, I didn't realize till later that, or till now, that that's what was happening, is that the reason why it kind of was bothering me, but I wasn't really sure what it was because I was being set aside as different, not part of the mainstream culture, not part of where I was and where I was supposed to be growing up, and I got a lot of the same kind of thing in restaurants, the same exotic thing. Yeah.
People make bets on
Don't worry,
whether you're this or that.
When you get older, you don't comment as much.
Yeah. Yeah.
As much. But they still do. Yeah.
Oh, one thing, being from Ohio and having family from Indiana, very much in the Midwest, things are either black or white, racially. And so if you don't fit that particular mold, everybody has to figure out exactly where are you on the spectrum. Are you provisionally white or are you provisionally black? And that's the way people kind of, categorize you, because everything is very much you're put into a compartment. And, growing up in Ohio, growing up in Cleveland, everybody had their own neighborhoods. And literally, if you crossed a certain street or a certain line, and you ended up in Pole Town, or you ended up with the Hungarians on the other side of Buckeye Road, you were in the wrong place, you were out of context. And first of all, people ask you, what are you doing here? What is your business here? Why are you here in the first place? And you had rules. I remember my mother telling me, don't go there, you can't go here, you can't talk to these people, you can't talk to those people. That was kind of the way that it operated for your own survival, your own safety. But back to the language thing, I get the same thing in Marquette, don't look like you sound from. And that's because we have to make shifts in how we speak. So there's a black language, and that's even broken down into different regional parts. So people can tell I'm from the Midwest versus from being from the South versus being from New York. There's a New York black accent, and then there's a New York accent, which for whites. Same thing in California, same thing in different other places. So, I always had to have these shifts when I was growing up, because my mother was a teacher, and so she would ban us from talking in a way that was quote unquote unintelligent. She used to say Queen's English in this house. So if you come in the house and you're talking like your friends out the street, you can be sure to be correct. However which way she would correct you, like whatever she could reach. So, and then you get back out in the street, and it's a different set of language that you have to deal with. I remember when I was a kid, we would go down south and see my cousins. My cousins were in Detroit, and I would go down South Carolina, and we were literally speaking different languages for the first few days that we were together, because the whole Southern accent, the Carolina thing, all of that was different, and you had to adjust to different things. Like, we called soda pop in the North. They called it soda in the South. So if you went to the store and you wanted a pop, they look at you like you were crazy. No, he means soda. He doesn't mean pop, he means soda. So you had to, those are, little nuances that you had to adjust to when you went into that particular culture. If I went to see my cousins in Louisiana, it's a whole other language completely different, because they spoke Creole, which is a combination of English, Spanish, French. And, I was only down there a couple of times with them, And I swear to God, I just shut up the whole time because I didn't know what to say or how to say it or how to, transpire, because they were speaking a completely different language. Every third word or fourth word was an English word that I could make out. But everything else was like, oh God, it's gibberish. And then I was always, they used to sit there and laugh at me and point at me, he's the dude from Ohio. That's our Ohio cuss, no paying attention.
Respecting time. We meet again tomorrow, 3 to 5. Thank you for your participation. For day 2.
Thank you.
Thank you for day 1. See you in day 2. Bring a friend.